I set the table, I cooked the feast, I arranged every detail, all to hear my husband, in front of his mistress and his partners, say, "You're not wife material." They laughed. I did not. When my glass hit the floor, they thought I was clumsy. They did not know I had already pushed the button that would end his entire world. My name is Lexi Rivera, and the skin of my palms was raw. They smelled of roasted garlic, lemon polish, and the faint, acidic tang of the bleach I'd used to scrub the guest bathroom grout that morning. My house, our house, this mausoleum of glass and steel in Maple Ridge, was finally perfect. The vaulted ceilings, which usually made me feel like a specimen in a jar, tonight reflected the warm, strategic glow of spotlights I had rented. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Denver skyline was a distant, cold glitter. Tonight was Grayson's 38th birthday, and this house was a stage. Every person here was an actor, or a target. This was Grayson's crowd. The sharks from HelioCore Capital, men with $1,000 suits and predatory smiles, their wives silent and skeletal beside them, a few local government faces, people Grayson needed to impress, their eyes already calculating the value of his hospitality. I had prepared everything. I had marinated the beef for 72 hours. I had hand-selected the microgreens for the salad. I had curated the playlist of inoffensive, expensive-sounding jazz that was now just a dull thrum beneath the real sound of the room, the braying laughter of men sealing deals. And I, Lexi, was the head waitress. Grayson hadn't said it, but his actions were clear. I was in a simple, modest navy dress he'd called classic. I was meant to circulate, to refill, to facilitate. Sloane Parrish, his 25-year-old assistant, was the hostess. She was in a white dress, a stark, almost bridal white, cut so low you could see the press of her ribs, and so high that when she sat, the fabric barely covered her thigh. And she was sitting. She was perched on Grayson's lap, right on the bespoke tailored thigh of his new suit. He, my husband, had one hand resting possessively on her hip, his thumb drawing lazy circles. It was not hidden. It was a performance, a declaration. I was holding a bottle of champagne. Not just any champagne. This was the $90 a bottle vintage his boss preferred. My hands were steady as I poured for Councilman Davies, steady as I smiled at Mrs. HelioCore herself. But then I saw it. Sloane leaned in, her blonde hair falling over Grayson's shoulder. She murmured something. He laughed, a low, intimate rumble I hadn't heard directed at me in years, and then, with an infuriating, casual ownership, she reached up. She wasn't just fixing his tie. She was tracing the lapel of his blazer, her fingers brushing the skin of his neck. It was a touch so familiar, so practiced. It screamed of mornings I did not see, of nights I was told were client dinners. My hand did not just tremble, it spasmed. It was not alcohol. I had not had a sip. It was rage. A rage so pure and so cold, it felt like an electric shock. The heavy green bottle, slick with condensation, simply left my grasp. It did not thud. It exploded. The crash on the imported walnut floor was a gunshot in the crowded room. Silence. Sudden and absolute. Then, the sound of liquid, the $600 champagne, spreading like a golden stain, a venomous, glittering serpent across the wood, a collective gasp, and then, inevitably, a snicker. Someone in the back, one of the junior analysts, let out a choked laugh. I looked at Grayson. His face was not concerned. It was not embarrassed. It was a mask of pure, cold annoyance. His eyes, the blue eyes I had once thought were kind, flickered to his boss, then to the councilman, and then, finally, they settled on me. His voice was not loud. It was quiet, penetrating. It cut through the silence, through the jazz, through the last 10 years of my life. "You're not wife material, Lexi." He said it, just like that, in front of everyone. He let the words hang, letting them soak into me, into the floor. Then he added, as if an afterthought, "You're just convenient." The words sucked the air from my lungs. They were louder than the crash, sharper than the glass. Sloane. She did not move from his lap. She merely turned her head, her perfectly painted red mouth twisting into a smirk of pure, unadulterated victory. She lifted one hand, her fingernails a matching, bloody red, and splayed it across Grayson's chest. A flag, a brand. She was marking her territory. She laughed, a light, tinkling sound, and hid her mouth behind those red nails. Convenient. I was the one who had moved from Austin. I was the one who had quit a 6-figure project management job. I was the one who learned to make his keto meals, who remembered his mother's birthday, who hosted these godforsaken parties to build his career. Convenient. My body moved before my brain did. I sank to my knees, fumbling for a napkin, for a towel, for anything. My only instinct was to clean up the mess, to fix it, to erase the scene. My hand, the one that had betrayed me, plunged into the spreading puddle of foam and glass. A sting, sharp, immediate, and deep. I looked down. A shard of the green bottle was embedded in my palm. Blood, dark and rich, welled up instantly. It was shocking in its vibrancy. 1 drop, 2, it pooled in my hand, then dripped, mixing with the spilled champagne on the pristine floor. My blood, on his floor. The laughter, which had been a nervous titter, now found its courage. It was louder. Sloane was laughing openly now, leaning her head back against Grayson's shoulder, and that was it. That was the sound. The click. For the last 6 months, I had been living in a fog of forgetfulness, a fog of anxiety, a fog of the sleep vitamins Grayson so thoughtfully provided, the ones that made my head feel thick and my memory porous, the fog that he and his pet doctor had been cultivating, the one that was meant to make me unstable. That fog, in the instant my blood hit the floor, did not just lift, it snapped, it shattered, just like the bottle, and in its place was an arctic, beautiful clarity. I was not sad, I was not hurt, I was awake. I looked up, my hand bleeding freely onto the wood. I looked past the amused faces, the pitying stares, the open contempt. I looked directly at my husband. He was still smirking. He was looking at the woman he had successfully broken, the forgetful, clumsy, unstable wife who was no longer useful. He saw the weak, crying woman he was planning to have committed. He saw a problem he had finally managed to solve. He did not see me. He did not see the woman who had spent the last 3 weeks meticulously, calmly, and soberly planning his complete and utter ruin. He did not see the project manager from Austin who used to run 8-figure infrastructure deals and could spot a weakness in a system from a mile away. My lips tilted. It was not a smile. It was the pulling back of skin over teeth, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, the smile of a woman who knew the ending. He thought this moment, this public humiliation, was the end of me. He was wrong. This was the end of him. Because upstairs, in the walnut-paneled home office that he had taken from me, a simple gray tablet sat on the polished desk. Its screen was dark, but its internal clock was very, very active. In my mind, I saw the countdown clock I had set. It was ticking down. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. In 3 minutes, a series of encrypted, timed emails would be sent. They were addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the regional IRS office, and for maximum internal damage, the entire board of directors at HelioCore Capital. They contained meticulously organized spreadsheets, scanned bank statements, and audio files, all the proof of the quiet, brilliant fraud he and Sloane had been running, diverting client funds into shell companies. As I knelt in the wreckage of his party, my blood mixing with his celebratory champagne, the timer ticked. 2 minutes, 53 seconds. The end of his life had already begun, and I, his convenient, not wife-material wife, was the only one in the room who knew it. I wasn't always the woman bleeding on the floor. Before I was this, I was Lexi Rivera from Austin. At 32, I had been a senior project manager. I ran 8-figure infrastructure timelines. I coordinated teams of engineers, architects, and lawyers. My job was to see a complex, messy system and bring it to order, on time and under budget. I was good at it. I was organized. I was sharp. And I was respected. Then came Grayson Blake. With his HelioCore ambition and his vision of a life in Denver, he painted a beautiful picture. He was on the fast track. He said he needed a partner, someone to build with. But what he meant, I now understood, was that he needed a support structure. He needed an unpaid live-in executive assistant. So I left Austin. I left my job, my team, my sun-baked apartment, and my identity. I moved to the cold, thin air of Maple Ridge to support my husband's career. I became perfect. I was a machine of domestic efficiency. My alarm was set for 5 a.m. Before the sun even thought about touching the Rockies, I was in the kitchen. Grayson required a green smoothie to optimize his mental clarity. That meant I was washing kale and measuring spirulina in the dark. The roar of the Vitamix the only sound in the house. I learned to cook keto. I, who had lived on Texas barbecue and breakfast tacos, suddenly found myself mastering almond flour bread and calculating net carbs. I memorized his schedule. I knew which days he needed a high-protein lunch packed and which nights required a client dinner at home. I hosted those dinners. I memorized the names of his partners, their wives, their children, and even their preferred brand of scotch. I smiled. I laughed at their terrible jokes. I made sure the steak was always medium rare and the wine was always breathable. I was the silent, efficient engine that made his public life run smoothly. I did it because I thought that was the job. I believed in the partnership. My mother, Carol Rivera, always said, "Smart, ambitious men are difficult. Mija, you have to be patient. You endure the storms, and you will be rewarded." So I tried. I tried harder than I had ever tried at my paying job. Then, about 6 months ago, the glitches started. I would find my car keys in the refrigerator. I would show up for a dental appointment on a Tuesday that had clearly been scheduled for Wednesday. I started fumbling with passwords, the online banking, our joint investment account, even the alarm system code. My fingers would type the familiar sequence, only to be met with red, angry text, "Access denied." Grayson's concern was a performance worthy of an Oscar. He would wrap me in a hug, his hand rubbing my back, his voice thick and low. "Lexi, honey, are you okay? You seem so scattered lately." It was always me. I was scattered. I was forgetful. I was the problem. He was the one who suggested I see a doctor. "It's just post-pandemic stress. Lexi," he'd said, his voice dripping with false empathy. "Everyone is struggling. Maybe you just need something to help you sleep, to quiet your mind." He found the doctor. He picked up the prescription. He was so helpful. I believed him. God help me. I believed him. Because the alternative was too terrifying. I kept trying harder, pushing against the fog in my head, convinced that if I just made one more list, set one more reminder, I could get back to being the perfect, efficient wife he needed. The first crack in my denial was a smell, bergamot, a sharp, citrusy, distinctly masculine scent, but not Grayson's. He wore sandalwood. I wore a light floral. This was new, and it was on his pillow. I changed the sheets, and 3 days later, it was back. I told myself it was a new soap at the office, a handshake with a client. I was an idiot. The real alarm bell was the phone call. I was in the kitchen, organizing the pantry, a task I now did 3 times a week, just to feel in control. The house landline rang. We never used the landline. It was only for the internal system linked to HelioCore, a privilege for senior partners working from home. I picked it up. "Sloan," a woman's voice chirped. "This is Lexi Blake," I answered. A pause. Oh my God. "Mrs. Blake, I am so sorry. This was meant for Sloan Parrish's extension. It must have misrouted." I hung up. Sloan Parrish, the new assistant, 25 years old, fresh from a sorority, with legs that started at her chin and a resume so thin it was transparent. The kid Grayson said he was mentoring, the one who brought him coffee. the one who, apparently, now had an internal extension routed to my home. Still, I lied. I lied to myself. Aggressively. It's just work. He's a busy man. She's his assistant. This is what it takes to get ahead. I was desperate to believe this. Because if I admitted what I knew, that the smell of bergamot and the misrouted phone call were connected, then I had to admit the truth. I had to admit that I had traded a career I built myself, a life that was mine, to move to a cold city and be a servant for a man who was actively, flagrantly betraying me with a woman 7 years my junior. Admitting that felt like dying, so I stayed quiet. The final slap, the one that woke me up. It came 2 weeks ago. I was planning his 38th birthday. This party. I need it to be perfect. Lexi, he had said, not looking up from his phone. I know. Grayson, I've already contacted the caterer we used last. Actually, he cut in. I think Sloan should help you. My blood went cold. Help me why? He finally looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if I were a particularly slow child. She understands the client's taste better. Lexi, she's in the office. She knows the culture. It will be better for my image. She understands the client's taste better. He was not just sleeping with her. He was replacing me. He was taking my last remaining job, the role of the perfect corporate wife, and giving it to her. Right in front of me. He was outsourcing me from my own life. That was the moment the pain stopped being about infidelity. The affair was a simple wound, a knife in the back. This was a public execution. This was humiliation. He was not just cheating. He was telling me I was incompetent, that the very things I had sacrificed my life for, I was no longer good enough to do. That night, I did not cry. I did not yell. I sat in my car, in the dark, in the garage of the house my supposed forgetfulness was helping him buy. The fog in my head, the haze from the vitamins he gave me, it was still there. But underneath it, a different part of my brain clicked on. It was the project manager. I stopped seeing my life as a failed marriage. I started seeing it as a hostile takeover, and I, Lexi Rivera from Austin, knew exactly how to handle a hostile takeover. I stopped lying to myself. I stopped taking his vitamins, and I started looking at every single detail of his life, not as a wife, but as someone preparing for a lawsuit. Sloan arrived at the house 3 days later to approve the party concept. The air grew thinner, colder. The moment her Tesla slid into the driveway, she walked in not as a guest, but as an inspector, her heels clicking an announcement of ownership on the walnut floors, and she was wearing that perfume, the bergamot. It was not a subtle trace this time. It was a cloud, a deliberate marking of territory. It filled my kitchen, my living room, my air. She ran a manicured hand over the quartz countertop I had picked out. "This is nice, I guess," she said, her voice a bored drawl. "But a bit cold. We should warm it up with a runner. Maybe something in a cream shag." I just smiled. The smile of the good, forgetful wife. "That's a great idea. Sloan, I'm just so bad at this stuff." "It's fine. Lexi, that's why I'm here," she said, patting my arm. She walked through the house, pointing. The floral arrangements were wrong. The lighting was too dim. She discussed the catering menu I had already finalized, suggesting changes with a wave of her hand, as if I were the assistant. And through it all, I nodded. I agreed. I fetched her sparkling water. I was the perfect, faded-out wallpaper. Then, the gift. We were standing at the kitchen island. She was scrolling through a playlist on her phone, complaining about my ancient jazz selection. Her phone was bright white, a contrast to the dark stone, just like her dress would be. "Oh, Grayson's calling me," she said, looking at her screen. She didn't answer. She just looked at it. Then she looked at me. "Lexi, could you be a doll and grab the fabric swatches from my bag? They're in the car. I want to show you the new drapes I'm thinking of for the dining room." "I'm thinking of..." "Of course," I said, my voice meek. I turned and walked to the mudroom. grabbed my own keys, and went out into the cold garage. I took my time. I counted to 60, slowly. When I returned, empty-handed, I already knew what I would find. Her phone was right where she'd left it, screen up on the island. My own phone buzzed on the counter beside it, a text from Grayson. Running late, Sloan handling everything. Her phone lit up, a notification, not a call, a text. I looked at it. I could hear her outside, talking to the landscaper about the exterior lighting. She had accidentally left her phone. She had sent me on a pointless errand. She wanted me to see this, or, at the very least, she was so arrogant she didn't care if I did. It rang, a text chime, then a second one. Then it was quiet. My heart was not pounding. It was cold. It was still. The project manager, was simply assessing a new piece of data. I looked at the phone, and then, my hand, steady as a surgeon's, picked it up. I swiped up. It was not locked. She had left it unlocked. The message thread was at the top of the screen. G. My husband. I didn't have to scroll. The most recent messages were right there, a conversation from that very morning. Sloan. She's so clueless. She's just nodding at everything I say. G. Perfect. Keep her calm. After the party, it's done. Sloan. Is the paperwork ready for Monday? G. My lawyer has the file from Dr. Evans. Severe anxiety and dissociative episodes. He's ready to testify. Once we file, I'll petition to have the house moved into the trust. She won't be in a state to contest it. My breath hitched. A file. A doctor. This was not just an affair. This was a conspiracy. I scrolled up, my thumb flying. I had to see it all. G. We just need her signature, and with her mental state, it will be easy. Sloan. She's a wreck. She couldn't even find her keys this morning. G. I know. The dosage in her vitamins is stable. Then, Sloan. Stable. She's definitely getting foggier. She asked me the same question 3 times. The dosage, in her vitamins. My blood did not run cold. It turned to ice. It stopped moving. I stood in my perfect kitchen, bathed in sunlight, and I finally understood. The sleep vitamins Grayson bought for me. The ones he put in my smoothie every morning. The ones that made me forgetful. I put the phone down. I walked, calmly, to the pantry. I pulled out the large container of Splenda he used for his coffee, and I poured a small mound of the white powder onto the counter. With my finger, I sifted through it. There it was. A small, white, unlabeled pill, and another, and another. He hadn't even bothered to crush them. He had just mixed them into the sweetener, assuming I was too stupid or too foggy to ever notice. He was drugging me. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not smash the expensive, cold-pressed juice from the refrigerator. I picked up Sloan's phone again. My hands were shaking now, but not with fear. It was adrenaline. It was the white-hot, focused rage of a woman who had just been handed a weapon. I photographed everything, every single message, the conversation about the doctor, the plan to move the house into a trust, the specific damning texts about the dosage and my vitamins. I photographed the pills in the Splenda. Then I walked into the garage, to the old, battered laptop I hadn't used since I left Austin. It was hidden under a pile of gardening supplies. I turned it on. The battery was dead, as I knew it would be. I plugged it in, waited, and powered it on. I opened a new encrypted email account I had created last week under a false name. Lexi Rivera was dead. This was a new person. I emailed every single photograph to that secret account. Then I deleted the pictures from my own phone. I wiped the cache. I cleared the log. I became a ghost. I went back to the kitchen. I put the phone back on the island, exactly as she had left it. I wiped my fingerprints off. I was standing there, staring at the pills on the counter, when Sloan walked back in, a smug look on her face. "No swatches?" she asked. Disappointment faked poorly. "I'm sorry. Sloan, I forgot what I was looking for," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of the confused, foggy woman they were creating. Her smile was poison. "It's okay, Lexi. Don't worry about it. I understood. They were not just planning to divorce me. They were not just planning to take my money. They were planning to have me declared legally insane. They were building a case, pill by pill. Forgotten key by forgotten key, to prove that I was not competent, to take my house, my assets, my signature, and my credibility. They wanted to erase me, and they were using my own home as the asylum. That night, after she left and Grayson came home, I accidentally checked our joint bank account. I was confused about a charge, and that's when I saw it. A transfer, not a small one, $50,000, and another, all moving from our joint savings to a new entity. Maple Ridge Event Holdings, LLC, an event company. How convenient. A shell. A beautifully simple, almost insulting way to bleed our shared assets dry before he filed. A company I was certain he had set up, probably with Sloane's name on the paperwork. I closed the laptop. The final piece of the project plan had just locked into place. I went into the master bathroom. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked pale. She looked, for all the world, like a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I leaned in, close to the glass, until my breath fogged it. "It's fine," I whispered to the reflection. "You chose the birthday party as the stage." My reflection looked back, and for the first time in months, her eyes were not foggy. They were sharp. They were clear. "Then we'll have the show at the birthday party." The project plan was initiated. Phase 1 was containment. My kitchen, the room I had poured my life into, was now hostile territory. It was a contaminated zone. I stopped eating anything from the refrigerator. I stopped drinking the filtered water from the tap. Grayson still made my morning smoothie, but I would smile, thank him, and pour it down the bathroom sink while the shower ran. The sound masking the gurgle of the drain. My car became my pantry. The trunk of my Mercedes, the one Grayson paid the monthly note on but had put in my name. A detail he'd overlooked in his arrogance was now a survival kit. I bought bottled water from a gas station across town. I ate protein bars I purchased with cash. I had a small stash of apples and almonds. I bought a coffee from a drive-thru every morning, sipping it in a parking lot, watching the city wake up, feeling my mind clear and sharpen with every passing day off his vitamins. Phase 2 was documentation. I needed to build my own file to counter the one they were building against me. I found a psychiatrist on the other side of Denver, a woman with iron gray hair and the sharpest eyes I had ever seen. I paid in cash, using the emergency fund I'd kept hidden from Grayson since we first moved here. I sat in her plush, quiet office. I did not cry. I did not rage. I simply laid out the facts. "My husband is systematically drugging me to make me appear mentally incompetent," I said, my voice as steady as if I were reporting a quarterly budget. "He has engaged a physician to create a fraudulent medical file to support this. I am here today because I need a non-biased, official evaluation of my current mental state. I am not anxious. I am not dissociative. I am being actively poisoned." I told her everything: the pills, the forgetfulness, the bergamot, the text messages. She listened for 2 full hours. She ran a battery of tests, asked me hundreds of questions. At the end, she leaned back and looked at me. "Mrs. Blake, Rivera," she corrected herself, using the name I had signed in with. "You are not unstable. You are, in fact, one of the most lucid and focused individuals I have ever met. You are also in a significant amount of danger. This evaluation will state, in no uncertain terms, that you are of sound mind and body. You will have the full report by tomorrow." The report was my shield. Next, I needed a sword. A friend from my old firm in Austin, a woman I trusted with my life, gave me a name. "She's a shark. Lexi," she had warned. "She's expensive. She's terrifying. And she hates men who screw over smart women. You'll love her." Camille Rowe's office was not in a high-rise. It was a discreet, unmarked brownstone in Cherry Creek. She wore a red leather jacket and did not waste time on pleasantries. I gave her the 30-second summary. The affair. The plan for the house. The fraudulent medical file. The pills in the Splenda. She didn't flinch. She just steepled her fingers. The affair is irrelevant. It's a no-fault state. It gets us nothing but a faster signature. The house. We can fight over. But trusts are messy. The fake medical file and the poisoning, that's the real meat. She leaned forward, her eyes bright. If he's willing to play the unstable wife card, we don't play defense, we don't play divorce, we play criminal. But to do that, Lexi, you need to bring me something dirtier than adultery. You need to give me something that makes a judge forget he's a pillar of the community. I need his career. He's laundering money, I said. I'm almost certain. Through a shell company called Maple Ridge Event Holdings. Camille smiled, a thin, cold, terrifying smile. Then you need to prove it. Get me that. And we won't just take the house. We'll take his freedom. I left her office with a new name on my list, Paul Hines, a former financial crimes detective who had gone private. He was quiet, unassuming, and looked permanently tired. He looked like the last man you'd ever notice, which made him perfect. I met him in a noisy food court, the safest place for an anonymous conversation. I slid a prepaid burner phone and a thick envelope of cash across the table. I need you to look into my husband, Grayson Blake, and his assistant, Sloan Parrish. I need you to find every connection between them, HelioCore Capital, and this shell company. Paul didn't count the money. He just pocketed it. What's the timeline? Fast. His birthday is in 2 weeks. I need it all by then. While my team was assembling, I continued my own performance. Phase 3. Managing expectations. I had to be the woman they expected me to be. I had to be the woman who was falling apart. My performance was flawless. I forgot to send a critical email Grayson had asked me to forward from his home account. I accidentally brewed a pot of decaf coffee before his most important virtual meeting of the quarter. I showed up 20 minutes late to a dinner reservation, claiming I had gotten lost in our own neighborhood. I don't know what's wrong with me. Gray, I'd whisper, tears welling in my eyes, and he would hug me. That same, false, comforting hug. It's okay, honey. It's the stress. The vitamins will start to help soon. You just need to rest. The look he and Sloan exchanged over my head at that dinner, a look of shared conspiracy and pitying contempt, was all the motivation I needed. They believed it. They were convinced their plan was working. The mouse was walking right into the trap. Paul Hines called the burner phone 5 days later. Meet me. Same place? Noon? This time, his tired eyes had a spark. He slid a thin file across the table. You were right about the shell. Maple Ridge Event Holdings is registered to a PEO box, which is registered to a holding company, which is registered to Sloan Parrish. Clean, but not clean enough. He tapped a piece of paper. But that's not the good part. He explained it in simple terms. Grayson didn't have access to the main client fund controls, but Sloan, as a new hire assistant, had a temporary high-level administrative user ID that was set to expire. They hadn't deprovisioned it, a huge security flaw. Your husband, Paul said, a note of professional admiration in his voice, has been using her login. He's been adjusting investments, skimming, taking small percentages from VIP client funds, the big, sleepy accounts that nobody watches, and diverting them into a separate sub-fund. He's embezzling, I said. He's committing federal wire fraud, Paul corrected. And the best part, he's implicated his girlfriend up to her pretty little neck. This, he tapped the file, is not a divorce. This is a prison sentence. That afternoon, I went to a bank I had never used. Miles from my home, I used my maiden name, Lexi Rivera. I opened a safe deposit box. Into that cold metal box, I placed the deed to the house. I placed the title to the Mercedes, the one still in my name. I placed a certified copy of my psychiatrist's report. I placed the new, thick file from Paul Hines, and I placed a USB drive containing copies of every single text message, every bank transfer, every piece of evidence I had. I locked it. I was no longer Lexi Blake. Lexi Blake was a ghost. Lexi Rivera was the executor. I had one final piece of the plan, a witness. I called my mother, Carol Rivera, in Ohio. "Mom," I said, my voice carefully pitched to sound weary, overwhelmed. I'm not doing great. This party for Grayson is it's too much. I'm forgetting things. I'm so stressed." "Oh, mija," her voice, full of that familiar, frustrated love. Could you maybe fly out? Just for the week? Just until the party. I really need help. I need my mom." She booked her flight before we even hung up. She would be my alibi. She would be the person who could testify that I was sane, that I was present, that I was just a stressed-out wife. Her presence in the house would be a living, breathing contradiction to the unstable woman in Grayson's file. That night, I went into my walk-in closet, to the section of clothes I never wore, the ones from my old life in Austin. I took a sticky note and a black marker. I wrote 5 simple words. "Don't forget you're sane." I stuck it to the inside of a boot, where he would never find it. It was not a reminder. It was a promise. My mother, Carol, arrived like a worried, well-meaning whirlwind from Ohio. She bustled into the house, her eyes wide with a disapproval she reserved for homes that felt, in her words, like nobody actually lives in them. She immediately started cleaning my already clean kitchen, her presence a warm, breathing-in-my-face reminder of a life I used to have. "Mija, you look like a ghost," she said, scrubbing a non-existent spot on the stove. "You're too thin. Is he feeding you?" "He's just busy, Mom. I'm just stressed. Like I said, I played the part for her, too. It was the kindest thing to do. She was a witness, but she was not a soldier, and I had to protect her from the front line. With her settled, I moved to the next phase, the most dangerous one. Harlan Blake, my father-in-law, was not a man you visited. He was a man you were summoned by. He lived in a sprawling, dark wood and leather fortress in the old wealthy part of Denver, a house that smelled of history, old money, and disapproval. He was a retired district judge, a man who had built the Blake family name on a foundation of unforgiving, rigid principles. He had never liked me. When Grayson introduced me, I saw the assessment in his eyes. Lexi Rivera, from Ohio. I was not from the right family, not from the right state, not from the right tax bracket. I was the girl from Austin, an ambitious, working-class detail he'd tolerated but never approved of. I called his private line. His assistant, a woman who had been with him for 30 years, answered. "He's not taking meetings." "Lexi," she said, her voice polite but firm. "It is not a meeting," I said, my voice as cold and clear as I could make it. "It is a matter of family honor, and it is a legal matter concerning the future of the Blake name and Heliocor Capital. You will tell him that. I will be there in 30 minutes. I hung up before she could respond. I drove there, the folder from Camille and the file from Paul Hines on the passenger seat. My hands were steady on the wheel. I was not a daughter-in-law coming to cry on his shoulder. I was a strategic partner proposing a merger, and I was bringing the leverage. He was waiting for me in his study. The room was lined with law books that were not for decoration. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car. He did not stand up. "Lexi," he said. It was not a greeting. It was a summons. "You have 30 minutes. Your mother is well." I trust he knew my mother was in town. Of course he did. "She's fine," I said. I did not sit. I walked to his desk and placed a thin black file in front of him. "I am not here to discuss Grayson's affair." His eyebrows, a formidable gray, shot up. That had been his first assumption. "I am here to discuss the criminal conspiracy he is running against me, and the federal wire fraud he is committing against Heliocor Capital, using your family name." The air in the room changed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The bored, retired judge was gone. The man who had sent people to prison for 20 years was now looking at me. "That is a significant accusation," he said, his voice a low gravel. And I have significant proof, I replied. I opened the file. I did not present it emotionally. I presented it as a case. Exhibit A, I said, sliding the printed, time-stamped text messages across the desk. A conspiracy between my husband and his assistant, Sloane Parrish, to commit me to a psychiatric facility. His eyes scanned the page. I saw his jaw clench. Exhibit B, I laid out the photos of the pills in the Splenda, the means by which they are attempting to fabricate the symptoms, by drugging me. Exhibit C, I handed him the copy of the fraudulent psychiatric report from Dr. Evans, alongside the certified counter-evaluation from my own doctor, declaring me of sound mind. He read both, his breathing visibly steady, but a dark, dangerous color was rising in his neck. He was not angry for me. He was furious at the stupidity, the vulgarity of the act. And finally, I said, Exhibit D. I gave him Paul Hines' full report, the shell company, Maple Ridge Event Holdings, the use of Sloane's high-level user ID, the list of VIP client funds names he recognized. I was sure that were being skimmed. He spent 10 minutes reading that file. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of him turning a page. He was no longer a father. He was a man watching his entire legacy, his name, his son, his reputation burned to the ground. He closed the file. He looked at me, and for the first time, he was not looking at the girl from Ohio. He was looking at an equal. He's a fool, Harlan stated. It was a verdict. He's not just a cheat. He's a sloppy, arrogant fool. He risks the family. He risks the firm. He risks my clients. He steepled his hands. So, what do you want? Lexi. This was the moment. He was not asking what I wanted in a divorce. He was asking for my price to handle this. I do not want a settlement, I said, my voice low and steady. I do not want the house. I do not want alimony. I want him to lose everything. I want him to be stripped of his position, his reputation, and his freedom. And I want it to happen in front of the very people he is trying to impress, the people he is leveraging his entire life to climb. Harlan Blake stared at me. A slow, cold, appreciative smile spread across his thin lips. It was a terrifying sight. The birthday party, he said. Yes, I replied. His stage? Good. Harlan nodded. That's good. The executive vice president from the New York office will be there, the firm's general counsel, Councilman Davies. They all need to see this. They need to see the threat neutralized, and they need to see that the Blake family cut out the cancer itself. He was in. He was not just an ally. He was a co-conspirator. He reached for his old black rotary-style phone. This was not for show. This was the phone he used for calls that were not to be traced, not to be logged. He made 3 calls. Get me Agent Riley, he said to the first. A pause. Riley, it's Judge Blake. I have a situation for you. A multi-million-dollar wire fraud case at HelioCore. It's a gift, but it has to be opened on a specific night. Let me tell you what you need to know. He made the second call. Put me through to Mark Jennings. A pause. Mark? Harlan Blake? You've been writing about HelioCore's incredible rise for a year. How about you write about its potential fall? I'm giving you an exclusive. There's a party in Maple Ridge. You're going to want to be outside. The third call. Chief, it's Harlan. I am calling in the favor from 2003. No, it's not for me. It's for the law. I need a clean, by-the-book response team at a specific address, at a specific signal. No sirens, no drama. Just quiet. Efficient justice. He hung up. He looked at me. My people will be in place. They will be guests, or they will be on standby. You will have your stage. He had one condition. You will not, he said, his voice dropping to a command. Make this family look like a chaotic, hysterical mess. You will not scream. You will not cry. You will not throw wine. This will be clean. It will be surgical. It will be legal. Do you understand me? That was always the plan, I said. I am a project manager. Harlan, this is just a project. A demolition. He nodded, satisfied. Then his eyes softened. But only a fraction. A practical matter had occurred to him. "Your mother," he said. "Carol. She cannot be in that house when this happens. It's a war zone, and she's a civilian. She will come here. She will spend the next few days with me and my staff. She will be safe, and she will be out of the way." It was not a request. It was an order, and it was the kindest, most practical thing he could have done. "I will tell her it's a security precaution for the party," I said. "Good." I stood up. The meeting was over. I had walked into this house as the unapproved, problematic wife. I was walking out as the executor of his son's destruction, with the full backing of the patriarch. As I reached the door, he spoke one last time. "Lexi," he said. I turned. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You're not wife material. You're Blake material." I left his house, knowing I had just secured the most powerful and most terrifying weapon in Denver. Grayson was planning to fight a hysterical wife. He had no idea he was about to go to war with his own father. The week leading up to the party was a masterclass in performance art. I was no longer a project manager. I was a tragic heroine, and I was playing the role of a lifetime. My mother, Carol, was safely ensconced at Harlan's estate. I'd sold her on the idea of high-profile guest security, a story she'd found both ridiculous and flattering. "They need to check the house for—" "What bombs?" she'd asked. "Oh, mija, these rich people are crazy." "It's just a precaution. Mom, please. For my nerves." My nerves, of course, were the one thing that was completely intact. She'd agreed, and Harlan's driver had picked her up in a black sedan that was probably bulletproof. With my witness safe, I was free to descend into my breakdown, Sloan, empowered by my apparent weakness and Grayson's public endorsement, became a constant, suffocating presence. She was no longer just visiting. She was auditioning for the role she was certain she had already won. She arrived on Tuesday with a stack of paint swatches. "The master bedroom is just so heavy," she announced, holding up a strip of pale, non-committal gray. "It needs to be lighter, more serene. Don't you think, Lexi?" She was talking about my bedroom, the one I had shared with my husband. She was, quite literally, planning to paint me out of the picture. Grayson was there, watching me, waiting for the explosion that would confirm his unstable diagnosis. I looked at the paint chip. I looked at Sloane's bright, predatory face. I let my shoulders slump. I even managed to make my lower lip tremble. Just a little. It's your house too, Grayson. If you think Sloane's idea is better, then that's fine." Sloane's smile was a flash of white teeth. She had won. She looked at Grayson, a triumphant, "See how easy this is, glance." "That's my girl," Grayson said, patting my head. My head. Always so agreeable. The contempt from both of them was a physical thing, a thick, oily film in the air. I let it cover me. Contempt was good. Contempt meant they were underestimating me. Contempt meant they were blind. Grayson, now convinced of his intellectual and genetic superiority, grew bolder. On Wednesday night, he had 2 of his HelioCorps friends over for poker. I was, as usual, serving drinks. I was carrying a tray of scotch when I heard him, his voice booming from the patio. "The thing you have to understand," he was pontificating, "is that at a certain level, you need a partner who is an asset. A wife is a reflection. Lexi," he sighed, a heavy, dramatic sound. "Lexi is sweet. She's a wonderful hostess, but she's not ambitious. She's not, she's not wife material for a man who's going to be an EVP. You need a killer, not a kitten." A killer. I paused in the shadow of the doorway, the glasses clinking on my tray. I had to physically restrain myself from walking out and saying, "You have no idea." Instead, I waited a beat, then walked out, my eyes downcast, as if I hadn't heard. I placed the drinks down and fled. a perfect imitation of a wounded kitten, to seal the deal. I staged my own confirmation. I waited until I knew Grayson was in his home office, the door pointedly ajar. I went into the master bedroom and called my old friend from Austin. I didn't actually dial. I just held the phone to my ear and spoke to a deadline. My voice was a perfect cracking whisper. I just don't know what to do. Sarah, I fake wept. I can't remember anything. I'm losing my keys. I'm forgetting appointments. I think I'm having a real breakdown. Grayson is so worried. Maybe he's right. Maybe I do need to go away to rest. I heard the sound of his desk chair creaking. He was listening. He was listening to me hand-deliver the justification for his entire plan. The final dinner before the party was the dress rehearsal. Sloan was over, again, to finalize the flow. Grayson had requested I make the flourless chocolate torte he supposedly loved, the one I knew he hadn't eaten in 5 years since he told me, in confidence, that he was allergic to chocolate. He only told Sloan he liked it. I spent an hour making it, and as I was taking it out of the oven, with both of them watching me from the kitchen island, I tripped over the edge of the rug. The glass dish didn't just fall. It shattered, sending scalding hot, black dessert across the white tile. Sloan gasped, jumping back. Grayson's face went purple. God damn it. Lexi, can you not do one thing, one simple thing, that was for our guests? I didn't have guests. It was just the 3 of us. Tears, real ones this time from the sheer, pathetic audacity of it all, welled in my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered, sinking to my knees in the mess, just as I had with the champagne. I'm so sorry. Gray, I'm so clumsy. I don't know what's wrong with me. Sloan just watched me, her arms crossed, a look of profound, final pity on her face. This was the woman she was replacing, this broken, crying, useless, chocolate-covered thing on the floor. Later, as I was scrubbing the grout, Sloan approached me. She was trying to be kind, which was, in its own way, the most violent thing she had ever done. Lexi, she said, her voice soft and condescending. About the party, I was thinking, this is a really big night for Grayson, his whole career, and he really needs to be the one to shine. I looked up, my hands red and raw. Okay, so, I think you should wear something simple, just let him have the spotlight. I saw that beige dress in your closet, the silk one. It's very elegant and simple. It won't distract anyone. Just a simple, supportive beige. Beige. She wanted to dress me in the color of non-existence, the color of wallpaper. I nodded, my eyes wide with manufactured gratitude. That's a really good idea. Sloan, thank you. It's so nice of you to think of that. That night, I took the beige dress, a $500 designer piece Grayson had bought me 2 years ago, and I put it in a Goodwill bag. Then I went to the hidden compartment in the back of my closet, the one behind the winter coats, and I pulled out the dress I had bought with my own cash last week. It was cobalt blue, the color of a gas flame. It was silk, but it was not simple. It was cut to the inch of my life. It was a declaration. It was the dress of a killer, not a kitten. I hung it, still in its garment bag, ready. I was not just playing defense, I was still building my offense. My phone, which I now carried everywhere, was my most valuable asset. Grayson, emboldened by my collapse, had gotten careless. He was no longer hiding his phone calls. He was making them from his office, believing I was in the other room. Resting, I had the recording, the crystal clear, high-definition audio recording of him on the phone with his lawyer. The file from Evans is solid, he'd said. We can file the petition Monday, after the party. I'll have her committed for a 72-hour psych hold. She's a danger to herself. By the time she gets out, the house will be in the trust, and all the liquid assets will be secured. I had another recording, too. The one from the repairman I had called last week. The dehumidifier in the study just died. I had explained to Grayson. my voice all in a flutter. "It's making a terrible noise." The repairman was from Paul Heinz's office. He was an ex-Mossad tech specialist, and while I distracted Grayson in the living room, he had installed 2 microscopic, high-definition, audio-capable cameras. One was in the kitchen, disguised as a screwhead on the range hood. The other was in the study, nestled in the spine of a fake law book on Grayson's shelf. The night before the party, Sloane came by one last time. She was dropping off the final seating chart she had printed. I was in my sad pajamas, the worn-out flannel ones. She was in a sharp black power suit. She handed me the binder. She was done with me. The transfer of power was complete. She looked at me, this woman who had taken my husband, my home, and was now wearing my perfume. She did not look at me with anger or even malice. It was worse. She looked at me with a kind of finality, like a vet looking at a sick animal, a problem that was sad, but would soon be solved. She looked at me like I was already gone. I let her have that final, perfect, contemptuous look. I let her believe she had won. She walked out of my house, her heels clicking, and I turned and looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the kitchen window. I smiled. "We'll see," I whispered to the empty room. "We'll see." The day of the party was not a celebration. It was an operational timeline. I was a project manager on a demolition job, and this was the final, irreversible phase. The first move was made 2 days prior. Through Harlan, Sloane had, with great fanfare, selected a new, trendy, and ridiculously expensive caterer. I had let her. I had even complimented her impeccable taste. Then, Harlan's assistant made a single phone call. 24 hours before the party, Sloane's chosen caterer had a catastrophic plumbing failure. A main line burst in their primary kitchen. They were devastated. They could not possibly handle the event. Sloane was apoplectic. She had screamed at the catering manager over the phone, a call I listened to with quiet satisfaction. Harlan's solution was immediate. He had a connection at a reliable, old-school catering firm, one that handled events for the governor. They could, as a personal favor to Judge Blake, mobilize their team and save the party. Sloane, trapped, had no choice but to agree. She hated it. She hated that she had failed and that an old man had to fix it. She took the credit for the save. Of course, telling Grayson she pulled strings. The new catering team that arrived at my house at noon was not just a catering team. The team lead was one of Paul Heinz's people. 2 of the waiters were off-duty cops, friends of the chief. They were not just serving champagne. They were providing security, my security. Next, the guest list. This was my domain. As the forgetful wife, I had fumbled with the online RSVPs, forcing Sloane to review the list repeatedly, but in my fumbling, I had made my own additions. Agent Riley, Harlan's man at the federal building, was now Mr. David Riley, a private equity investor from Chicago. He had, of course, accepted. Mark Jennings, the journalist Harlan had primed, was now Mark Jennings, an old family friend from Austin. He had, curiously, accepted the HelioCorp general counsel, a man Grayson feared and respected, had initially declined. Harlan had a quiet word with the CEO in New York, and suddenly the general counsel's schedule had miraculously opened up. He was now a priority guest. And finally, Camille Rowe, Esca. I added her as my old boss from my Austin firm, a woman I wanted to impress. Grayson had laughed. "Sure, Lexi, invite your little friend. It's good to show people you're still connected." The audience was set. The players were in position. The day before, I had executed the financial and legal maneuvers. Grayson, the finance expert, had made a critical mistake. He had left me on the title for the house, and he had, years ago, in a fit of efficiency, had me sign a comprehensive power of attorney document so I could handle the bills when he traveled. He had never revoked it. Why would he? I was his confused, incompetent wife. I had walked into our private bank, not the local branch, but the wealth management office downtown. I sat with our advisor, a man who had known me for years. I played the part. With Grayson's travel, and, frankly, I'm so scattered. I'm worried about security, I'd told him. I'd like to place a dual signature requirement on any transfer, wire, or withdrawal over $500, just until I feel more on my feet. The banker had seen it as a responsible, if quaint, request. He had stamped the paperwork. The accounts were frozen. Grayson wouldn't know until Monday. When he tried to move the funds to his shell company, the lock was in place. That same afternoon, I had met a notary from Camille's office at a local coffee shop. I signed the deed of gift, a simple, ironclad document, transferring ownership of the Maple Ridge property from Lexi Rivera Blake to Carol Rivera. It was filed with the county clerk at 4:30 p.m. The house was no longer mine. It was my mother's. Grayson was, at this very moment, throwing a lavish birthday party in a house he no longer had any legal claim to. And my mother, Carol, was safe. She had, per Harlan's plan, stayed with him for 2 days. This morning, I had called her, my voice bright. "Mom, you were right. I feel so much better. You being here, it just cleared my head. I think I'm going to be fine." I told her Harlan was sending her and her sister, my Aunt Maria, on an all-expenses-paid spa weekend in Miami as a thank you. Harlan's driver had not taken her to a spa. He had taken her to Denver International. She was on a flight to her sister's house, her phone turned off, safe, and completely removed from the blast radius. Now, the stage, the 85-inch television screen in the living room, Grayson's altar to the NFL, was my weapon. I had loaded a single USB drive. The file was innocuously named Grayson's 38th MP4. I had spent hours on it. The first 3 minutes were perfect. Photos of our honeymoon in Sedona, skiing in Aspen, him ringing the bell at Heliocor, happy, smiling, supportive Lexi, the perfect wife material. But at the 3-minute and 1-second mark, the tone changed, in the garage. Checking the wine. I met with Paul Hines' tech guy, the same one who had installed the cameras. He was disguised as the wine vendor. He handed me a final, encrypted USB. "This is the feed from the study camera," he whispered. "From last night. And the complete flowchart of the wire fraud. Just like you asked. It's a work of art. Mrs. Blake, it's so simple a child could understand it." "Good," I said. I merged the new files onto my master USB. The presentation was now complete. It would not just be the texts. It would be audio of Grayson and his lawyer. It would be video of him and Sloan in his office. And it would be a PowerPoint presentation, delivered by Paul, detailing his own destruction. I slotted the USB into the back of the television. It was cued, ready. Harlan had confirmed the last piece. The police chief would not be raiding the party. That was messy, as Harlan had put it. Instead, 2 of his senior detectives, in suits, would be arriving at 9:30 p.m. on the dot. They would be responding to a credible anonymous tip regarding financial crimes that had been called in. They would simply be there to ask Mr. Blake a few questions. Their presence, quiet and official, would be the final nail. It was 6 p.m. Guests would arrive in 1 hour. I went to my bathroom, I drew a bath, I soaked, and I let Lexi Blake, the forgetful, beige-wearing, sad wife, drain away with the water. I stood up, dried off, and walked into my closet. The Goodwill bag with the beige dress was gone. I took out the burner phone, the one I had used to communicate with Paul and Camille. I typed a new, final message. It was to Sloane's number. "Wear white. Tonight is all yours." I hit send. I knew her ego. She would see it as a sign. She would want to be the bride. I snapped the SIM card, crushed it, and flushed the pieces. I walked to the back of my closet. I unzipped the garment bag. The cobalt blue dress slid over my skin like liquid fire. It was not a dress of support. It was a dress of command. It was not wife material. It was a statement of intent. I put on the diamond earrings Grayson had given me for our first anniversary, a time I had still believed in him. I put on the red lipstick I had not worn since I left Austin. I looked in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back was not Lexi Blake. She was not the victim. She was not even Lexi Rivera. She was the project manager. She was the executor. She was the one who had read the fine print and was about to enforce the contract. Not wife material, I said to my reflection, my voice low and clear. Fine, then I'm the explosives. I descended the staircase at 7:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes after the first guests were scheduled to arrive. I had waited. I wanted the room to be full. I wanted them to have already absorbed the narrative before I even appeared. My entrance was, in itself, a small explosion. Grayson and Sloane were standing by the large fireplace, a perfectly staged portrait of a power couple. He, in his bespoke suit. She, just as I had predicted, in a stunning, form-fitting, brilliant white dress. It was practically a wedding gown. She was laughing, her hand on his arm, her head tilted back. Then the room quieted. They all turned to look at the staircase. I saw Grayson's face first. His smile froze, then melted into a look of pure confusion, which quickly hardened into annoyance. This was not the beige, supportive wife. This was a cobalt blue flame. This was not the plan. Sloane's face was even better. Her smile snapped shut, and her eyes, wide with triumph a second ago, narrowed with a sudden, venomous jealousy. I had stolen her spotlight. The irrelevant wife, had dared to wear a color. I just smiled, a small, vague, confused smile, and continued my descent. Lexi, Grayson said, his voice tight, as I reached the bottom step. That's quite a dress. Oh, I said, looking down as if I'd forgotten what I'd put on. Did I get it wrong? Sloane said beige. I thought this was beige. I'm so sorry. Gray. I get so confused with the lighting. The lie was so absurd, so blatant, that it was perfect. I saw the look pass between them. Not, she's defiant. It was, she's completely lost it. She's delusional. It worked. Grayson's anger deflated, replaced by that smug, pitying look. It's fine, honey. It's fine. Just try to enjoy yourself. Mingle. The room was already buzzing. As I walked, feigning a slight, unstable unsteadiness in my heels, I could feel the whispers. They parted around me, as if I were a leper. That's his wife, I heard one of the Heliocore wives murmur, her hand over her mouth. The one, Grayson told us she's been having a hard time. A breakdown. Oh, the poor thing. She looks terrified. And that dress. It's a little desperate, isn't it? The narrative was set. Grayson had done his job perfectly. I was the crazy, pathetic wife, clinging to her last threads of sanity. Sloane, on the other hand, was the hostess. She was a blur of efficient, white-clad energy. She was greeting the Heliocore EVP by name. She was offering a special, off-menu appetizer to Councilman Davies. She was kissing Grayson's friends, her hand possessively on his back. She was, in every way, the wife, at dinner. The seating chart, which Sloane had so meticulously arranged, was the final, public humiliation. It was a long, dramatic, mahogany table, set for 30. Grayson, the birthday boy, was at the head. Sloane, in a flagrant breach of all protocol, was seated to his right, in the wife's seat. I, Lexi Blake, was at the extreme opposite end, the farthest possible seat from my husband, next to a junior analyst's date who looked terrified to be there. I was, literally, put in the corner. Grayson stood. He tapped his glass. The room fell silent. I just want to thank you all for coming, he said, his voice warm and resonant. He looked around the table, at all the important faces. His eyes slid over me, at the far end, as if I were a piece of the floral arrangement. A man is nothing without his team, he continued. And my team has been incredible this year. especially Sloane. He turned to her. She looked up, her eyes wide and adoring. Sloane, you have been a rock. You've helped me so much at the company, your dedication, your insight. I truly could not have gotten through this last quarter without you. He raised his glass. To Sloane. They all drank. My lawyer, Camille Rowe, her face a mask of polite interest, took a sip. Mark Jennings, the journalist, did not drink. He wrote something down in a small black notebook. He was noting the public toast to the assistant, while the wife sat 30 feet away. It was a good story. The dinner was served, and I began my performance. I picked up the wrong fork. I accidentally knocked over my water glass, my hand trembling as I reached for it. The off-duty cop, disguised as a waiter, was at my side in an instant, cleaning it up, his face impassive. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice thick. I'm so clumsy. I don't know." "It's quite all right, Mrs. Blake," he murmured, and for a second, I thought I saw a glint of respect in his eyes. Then came the cake, a massive, beautiful chocolate torte, the very one I had destroyed. Sloane had, apparently, ordered a replacement. She stood, her white dress gleaming. "I have a surprise for the birthday boy." She cut the first slice. "I know this is your absolute favorite," she cooed, her voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. She took a small bit of the frosting on her finger. I watched her, my heart a cold, steady stone. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Grayson's chocolate allergy from 5 years ago was a lie he had told me, his wife, to avoid eating a dessert I had made, but for Sloane, he would eat anything. She walked over to him. She held up her finger. "A little taste." He opened his mouth. In front of his boss, his partners, the councilman, and his wife. He licked the chocolate frosting from his assistant's finger. It was a grotesque, medieval display of ownership. Mark Jennings, the journalist, was writing so fast I thought his pen would catch fire. Grayson licked his lips. "Amazing," he said, his eyes locked on Sloane. This was the man I had given up my life for. I felt a sudden, sharp, cold clarity. The play acting was over. It was time. I looked at my watch. 9:15 p.m. The team was in place. The video file was queued on the home server, linked to the remote in my hand. Harlan's detectives would be walking up the driveway in exactly 15 minutes. It was time for the final speech. Grayson, emboldened by the chocolate, the wine, and the public adoration of his mistress, stood up again. He was beaming. He was the king of his own pathetic castle. "One last thing," he said, holding his glass high. This year has been one of transformation, of change, and it's taught me something. It's taught me that to really grow, to really reach your potential, you have to be brave." He looked, for a fleeting second, down the table at me. "You have to be brave enough to leave behind the things that are no longer suitable, the things that are holding you back, the things that just don't fit anymore." He was firing me. He was firing me from my own life, in front of 30 people. This was his big moment. He raised his glass, ready for the final, triumphant toast. He never got to make it. I stood up. My chair scraped against the walnut floor. A harsh, ugly sound. Every head turned. Grayson stopped, his glass in the air, his mouth open. "I have a gift for you, Grayson," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was not trembling. It was a clear, calm, cobalt blue sound. It cut through the jazz. It cut through the whispers. "You've all been so wonderful," I said, looking around the table, my eyes landing on each of the key players, the EVP, the General Counsel, Agent Riley, Camille. And Grayson is right. This night is about change. So I put together a little video, a tribute. I smiled at my husband, who was still frozen, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "It's a gift, darling, a little something for all of us to change. and with my left hand, I raised the small, black remote, aimed it at the 85-inch screen, and pushed the button. The 85-inch screen came to life. The first image was us, on a beach in Florida, at our wedding. Grayson was in a white linen shirt, his arms around me. I was 27, and I was, by God, hopeful. A polite, relieved ripple of laughter went through the room. The guests smiled. Grayson, still standing with his glass in the air, visibly relaxed. His expression said, "Oh, it's just a sweet, sentimental video." "She's still my good, broken wife," the montage continued. Soft, instrumental music played, a photo of our honeymoon in Sedona, him dipping me theatrically against the red rocks, a clip of us at the first HelioCore Gala, me beaming with pride as he accepted an award. I was showing them, frame by frame, every moment I had been the perfect, supportive, flawless wife material. The music swelled. The final photo was a close-up of us, just last year. Smiling at this very house, the screen went black, the music stopped, a single, metallic click. The new image was not a photo, it was grainy, high-definition video. The timestamp in the corner read, 10:17 p.m., 2 nights ago. The angle was high. From the corner of the kitchen range hood, the room was silent. Sloane, in the same white dress she was wearing now, walked into the frame. Grayson followed. He backed her against the counter, and he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a hungry, angry, possessive kiss. The one he had licked the chocolate from his finger with. A woman at the table made a sound. A high, strangled gasp. "God," someone whispered. Sloane and Grayson, on the screen, broke apart. And then, the audio from the hidden camera, my broken dehumidifier installation, kicked in. It was crystal clear. Sloane's voice. "She's just so broken. Gray," she cried over a burnt cake. "It's almost sad." Grayson's voice, my husband's voice, captured forever. "It's perfect. Let her fall apart. The foggier she gets, the easier she'll be to sign." The room stopped breathing. The HelioCore executive vice president, a man who lectured on family values, was staring at the screen, his face ashen. The video feed stopped. The screen went black. Click, a new image, a screenshot of a text message thread. G and Sloane. G, the dosage in her vitamins is stable. Then, Sloane stable. She's definitely getting foggier. She asked me the same question 3 times. Click, a new slide. My lawyer has the file from Dr. Evans. Severe anxiety and dissociative episodes. He's ready to testify. After the birthday, it's done. Click, G. We'll commit her. A 72-hour hold. She'll be declared incompetent. By the time she's out, she'll have nothing left. Sloane, in her chair, let out a low, terrible wail. I turned my head and looked at my husband. He was no longer white. He was a deep, mottled purple. His eyes were not on the screen. They were on me. They were filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "If I were truly unstable," I said, my voice projecting into the suffocating silence, "if I were as foggy and dissociative as your paid-for doctor claims, would I have been able to record this?" Click, a new file played, audio only. It was Grayson's voice, from the phone call with his lawyer. "The file from Evans is solid. We can file the petition Monday. I'll have her committed for a 72-hour psych hold. She's a danger to herself. By the time she gets out, the house will be in the trust, and all the liquid assets will be secured." I clicked the remote, and the audio stopped. "Would I have had the presence of mind," I continued, my voice level, "to hire my own psychiatrist to get a full evaluation declaring me 100% sane? Would I have been able to open a new safe deposit box, in my maiden name, Lexi Rivera, and place every document, every title, and every piece of evidence of your conspiracy inside it?" I let that hang in the air. Then I smiled. "Oh," I said, as if I'd forgotten. "And then there's the fraud, Click, the screen changed again. This was Paul Hines' masterpiece. It was a PowerPoint slide. A simple, elegant flowchart. On the left, Heliocore VIP client funds. On the right, Maple Ridge Event Holdings, LLC Director Sloan Parrish, and in the middle, a series of damning red arrows, showing the exact path of $2 million, siphoned over 6 months, all using Sloan's temporary admin user ID. What? The Heliocore General Counsel said, standing up from his chair. What in God's name is that? That was the signal. From a table near the back, the man I had seated as Mr. David Riley, a private equity investor from Chicago, stood up. His date stood with him. They reached into their suit jackets and pulled out leather wallets, flipping them open. "Agent Riley, FBI, White Collar Crime Division," he announced, his voice booming over the stunned guests. "Agent Franks, Mr. Blake, you are under investigation for federal wire fraud and embezzlement. We received a highly credible, anonymous tip from an internal whistleblower at Heliocore." He nodded at me. "The tip," he said, "was just confirmed." On the other side of the room, Mark Jennings, my old family friend from Austin, was on his feet. His phone was out, and he was broadcasting. "This is Mark Jennings, live from Maple Ridge," he said, his voice a low, urgent murmur into his phone. "I am at the birthday party of Heliocore Vice President Grayson Blake, who has just been, you are not going to believe this, publicly accused by his wife of drugging her and orchestrating a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. Federal agents are on site right now." That was what broke Grayson. "You!" he screamed, his voice a raw, animal sound. He wasn't looking at the feds. He was looking at me. He lunged, not at me, but at the remote in my hand. He was going to stop the presentation. He never made it. A flash of red leather. Camille Rowe, my old boss from Austin, was out of her seat. She was standing between us. She was half his size, but she didn't flinch. Grayson, blinded by rage, put his hands on her to shove her out of the way. "Touch my client," Camille snarled, her voice low and full of gravel. "Touch her. Touch me. And I will add felony assault to the list of charges that will bury you. Now, go and sit down." He recoiled as if he'd been slapped, but the final, fatal blow came from his right. Sloan. She was on her feet, her white dress stained with tears and spilled wine. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She wasn't seeing a lost relationship. She was seeing a federal indictment. She pointed a shaking, red-nailed finger at the man she had licked chocolate from. "You," she shrieked, her voice cracking through the room. "You told me it was just a divorce. You told me it was a simple asset transfer. You said she was crazy. You used my login. You told me to. I didn't know about the funds. I didn't know." She was saving herself. She was throwing him under the bus, backing it up, and running him over again. The party was gone. It was a blast site. The guests were backing away, a horrified sea of silk and cashmere, moving toward the foyer, their phones out. Lawyers were being called. The Heliocore EVP was already in the corner, his back to the room, screaming into his own phone, in the chaos. The doorbell rang. One of the waiters, the off-duty cop, opened the front door. 2 men in dark suits stood on the threshold. Not feds. These were local. This was the chief of police himself. He walked into the room, his eyes taking in the scene in a single, practiced sweep. He saw the feds bagging laptops. He saw the journalist, still filming. He saw Sloan, sobbing in a heap. He saw Grayson, a broken, panting statue of rage. His eyes scanned the crowd. They found me, and I gave a single, respectful nod. Then, his gaze moved past me, to a wingback chair in the corner, a chair that had been empty. Harlan Blake, my father-in-law. He must have slipped in during the presentation. He sat there, a silent, iron-gray judge, watching his own son's execution. The chief of police looked at Harlan. Harlan looked back. And my father-in-law gave one, single, definitive nod. The verdict was in. The chief walked toward Grayson. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He just walked through the wreckage of the party. "Mr. Blake," he said, his voice calm, but carrying over the noise. "There's been a development. I'm afraid you're going to have to come with me tonight." The sound of the handcuffs was not a click. It was a flat, metallic thud. A sound of finality. One of the local detectives was securing a temporary zip-tie cuff around Grayson's wrist. Not the full arrest, but a procedural measure. My husband's face was a terrible, blotchy red. It was not the color of fear. It was the apoplectic, terrified rage of a king who had just been deposed in his own throne room. He was not afraid of prison, not yet. He was humiliated, and that, I knew, was so much worse for him. He wasn't looking at the feds. He wasn't looking at his father. He was staring at me. "You," he screamed again, a raw, gargling sound that tore from his throat. He lunged, but the detective's hand on his shoulder held him firm. "You're not wife material," he bellowed, the words echoing in the dead silent, multi-million-dollar room. "You were never good enough. I was just telling the truth. You're nothing." There it was, the sentence that had started all of this, the words he had used to condemn me, the words that had, in the end, signed his own death warrant. I walked toward him, not close enough to be grabbed, but close enough for him to see my eyes, close enough for the entire, horrified room to hear my response. Camille took a half-step with me, a silent, red leather-clad guardian. I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had tried to erase me. "That's okay, Grayson," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was a conversation, calm, clear. "I don't really want to be the wife of a man who poisons me." A new collective gasp from the guests. The vitamin texts had been fast, but this was the confirmation. I turned from him, and I addressed the room, my audience, the sharks from Heliocore, the councilmen, the wives who had pitied me. "I just want to clear the air," I said, as if I were closing a business meeting. Grayson was right about one thing. There are going to be a lot of changes. I pointed to the floor. This house, he was right. It was time for a change. Which is why I used my power of attorney 2 weeks ago to sign a deed of gift. This property is no longer in my name, or his. It was transferred, legally, to my mother, Carol Rivera. So, technically, I looked at the general counsel from Heliocore. "All of you are trespassing, but my mother is a gracious host. I'm sure she'll let you stay for the arrest." Someone, a woman, made a small, choking sound. "Also," I continued, "the joint accounts Grayson was planning to secure on Monday. They've been under a dual signature required for any transaction over $500 mandate for the last 3 days. They are frozen. His assets are no longer liquid." I looked at Grayson. "And the Mercedes I drove here and the one he thought he was paying for, that was purchased with a certified check from my own account, money from my job in Austin, before we were ever married. It's my car. It was always my car." I had just, in under 60 seconds, dismantled his entire net worth. I had left him with nothing but the suit he was standing in. He was shaking, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. And then, the final, surgical cut, from the wingback chair. Harlan Blake stood up. The old judge, his face a mask of iron, surveyed the room. He was not looking at his son. He was looking at the EVP. He was looking at the councilman. He was reestablishing the Blake name, and he was doing it by cutting out the infection. "The Blake family," Harlan announced, his voice a low, judicial boom that needed no microphone, "will cooperate fully with the federal and local investigation. We hide nothing." He then looked, for the first time, at Grayson. His eyes were not sad. They were dead. "From this moment," Harlan said, "none of us will protect you. You are on your own." It was a public execution, social, financial, and familial. Grayson was, in that instant, an orphan. A small, pathetic sound came from the floor. Sloane. She was still a heap of ruined white silk, mascara streaming down her face. She looked up, her eyes landing on me, the only person in the room not actively screaming or arresting someone. "What? What about me?" she whispered. I looked down at her. This girl, this child, who had been so eager to take my place. She had been a predator, but she was also a fool. She was a pawn in his game. Just as I had been, I felt nothing, just a cold, clean efficiency. "You'll be questioned by the federal agents," I said, my voice calm. "They already know you were the director of the shell company. They know your login was used. You have one, and only one. Move." She stared at me, her eyes begging. "Tell the truth," I said. "Tell them everything. Tell them how he told you to do it, how he manipulated you, how you were just following orders. Be the first one to talk. Cooperate fully. If you do, you might get out before he does." I saw the last flicker of loyalty in her eyes die, replaced by a new, sharp, desperate calculation. I had just given her the key to her own survival, and I had just handed the FBI its star witness against my husband. She nodded, a tiny, spastic movement, just as Agent Riley approached her and offered her a hand up. She was going to sing, and with that, my project was complete. I turned. The room was a tableau of ruin. I looked at the waiter, the one who was an off-duty cop. "The doors," I said. "Please open the main doors." He nodded and walked to the large, double walnut doors, pulling them open, a rush of cold, clean Denver night air swept into the room, clearing the smell of champagne and fear. I took one last look at the guests, at the men and women who had whispered about me, pitied me, laughed at me. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was loud and clear. "Thank you for attending the execution of a marriage." I turned my back on all of them. I did not run. I walked. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the grand foyer. My heels clicked on the imported stone. I walked right past the spot on the floor. The place on the walnut where, only an hour ago, I had knelt in a pool of my own blood and broken glass. The stain was gone, of course. The staff, his staff, had cleaned it up. But I saw it. I felt it. It was a scar on the floor, and I was walking over it, and I was not looking back. I could hear the commotion behind me. I heard the detective tell Grayson, "Sir, you need to sign this paperwork." He was being held. He was being processed. And he was being forced, by the sheer geography of the room, to stand right there and watch me walk away. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could feel his eyes on my back. I could feel the hatred, the impotence, the rage. He was finally watching me. He was watching the woman who was not wife material take her car, her money, her sanity, and her life, and walk out the front door. The guests, the ones who had laughed, they were silent. As I passed them, they looked away. They looked at the floor. They looked at their phones. They looked at anything but the woman who had just burned the entire world down and was walking out of the smoke without a single burn on her. I stepped outside. The door closed behind me. The sound was a heavy, satisfying thud. I was alone on the stone steps. The Denver night was cold, sharp, and brilliantly clear. The stars were out. I stood there, and for the first time in 10 years, I took a full breath. It didn't catch in my chest. It didn't feel heavy. It just was. I walked down the steps to my Mercedes. I got in. I put the key in the ignition. I did not cry. I did not smile. I was the project manager, and the demolition was complete. I put the car in drive, and I let him, and all of them, watch me drive away. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share it with you. Please, drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. And if you want more, please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this.